Young man saves woman, misses job interview unaware she's the CEO. Imagine that fleeting moment, the split second that can redefine the entire course of a life. For Raphael, that fateful moment didn't arrive shrouded in epic drama or a bombshell revelation. It presented itself in the prosaic form of a flat tire and the distressed face of a stranger by the roadside. On that sunny day, with anxiety throbbing in his temples due to the interview that could catapult him to the future he'd always dreamed of, Raphael was about to make a choice that, in the heat of the moment, seemed like an inconvenient detour, an irritating obstacle on his path to success. Little did he know that this unexpected act of kindness would be the first domino in an improbable chain of events, triggering a series of occurrences that would lead him down unimaginable paths, proving that sometimes it's the detours that lead us to our most extraordinary destinations. Prepare to delve into Raphael's story, where ambition meets generosity, and where chance weaves a surprising tapestry of missed opportunities and unexpected gains. If you enjoy this type of story, please subscribe to the channel and help us grow. I appreciate all your support. The relentless ticking of the clock on the dashboard of his old silver Gol seemed to echo the growing anxiety dancing in Raphael's chest. 9:15 in the morning. Exactly 45 minutes remained until the moment he'd been meticulously preparing for over the past few months. The interview for the coveted financial analyst position at Montero and Associates. The name echoed through the college halls like a beacon of opportunity, a passport to the Olympus of finance. Raphael, with his impeccable resume, sharp wit, and a gleam of determination in his brown eyes, felt this was his golden chance. The crisp white shirt, meticulously ironed, felt like a shield against the nervousness trying to steal his composure. The navy blue tie, a gift from his grandfather, was his lucky charm for important occasions. He had mentally rehearsed every possible question, every hypothetical scenario, every detail of his final year project that had established him as the top student in his class. The Montero and Associates headquarters, an imposing glass and steel skyscraper that scraped the blue sky of Blumenau, was already visible in the distance, rising like a monument to the success he so desperately craved. The motivational playlist he'd prepared for the trip, a selection of classic rock and self-confidence mantras, had fallen silent minutes ago, replaced by the city's growing hum as he approached the financial district. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts assailing him. "You can do this, Raphael, you're ready for this," he murmured to himself, gripping the already slightly sweaty steering wheel. It was then, rounding a gentle curve on Beira Rio Avenue, that he saw her. An elegant car, a black luxury sedan, was stopped on the shoulder, its hazard lights flashing intermittently. Beside the vehicle, a tall woman with brown hair that fluttered slightly in the morning breeze gestured with her cell phone in hand, a look of frustration etched on her face. Raphael hesitated for a split second. His gaze drifted to his watch. 9:20. Every minute was now precious, a coin of time he couldn't afford to waste. The mental image of the Montero and Associates waiting room, filled with anxious, suited candidates, flooded his mind. He could simply drive on, ignore the scene, and focus on his goal. After all, he had no obligation to help, but there was something about the woman's posture, a mixture of despair and helplessness, that made him hesitate. Besides, there was a quiet voice inside him, the same voice that prevented him from cheating on his college exams or taking advantage of others' goodwill, whispering about responsibility and empathy. With an almost imperceptible sigh, Raphael activated his turn signal and maneuvered his Gol to the shoulder, stopping a few feet behind the black sedan. He turned off the engine and observed the woman through the rearview mirror. She seemed impatient, alternating glances between the car's visibly flat rear tire and her cell phone. Getting out of the car, Raphael put on his best smile, trying to convey a sense of safety and helpfulness. "Good morning. Any problems?" he asked, approaching the woman. She turned and Raphael caught his breath for a moment. Her eyes were an intense blue, framed by long, dark lashes. Despite the situation, there was an aura of sophistication and confidence that emanated from her. "Oh, good morning," she replied in a slightly exasperated tone. "Yes, a flat tire, and to make matters worse, my cell phone seems to have no signal." She pointed to the device with a frustrated gesture. "I was trying to call my insurance, but nothing." Raphael nodded, understanding the situation. "Do you have a spare tire and tools?" She grimaced. "I'm almost sure I do. They're in the trunk. But, honestly, I've never changed a tire in my life. I haven't the slightest idea how to do it." This was the crucial moment for Raphael. He could politely apologize, claim an urgent appointment and go on his way. No one would blame him. But the woman's look of sincere distress stopped him. "I can help you," he offered, without hesitation. "I have some experience with this." Relief flooded the woman's face, softening the lines of worry. "You would? Oh, thank you so much. I'd be eternally grateful." As she opened the trunk, revealing a brand new spare tire and a seemingly complete toolkit, Raphael felt a pang of guilt. Every minute spent there distanced him further from his goal. 9:25. In 35 minutes, he should be in the Montero and Associates waiting room, making an impeccable first impression. Now he was sweating and racing against time, if there was even any time left. Ignoring the voice of reason screaming in his mind, Raphael rolled up his shirt sleeves and knelt beside the flat tire. The task wasn't the easiest. The bolts seemed stuck, and the hydraulic jack was a rather old and complicated model. But Raphael worked diligently, concentrating on each movement, while the woman watched him with an expression of growing gratitude. She introduced herself as Isabela Montero. The surname hit him like a lightning bolt. Montero. Could she be related to the owners of the consulting firm? He didn't dare ask, focused on his battle against the stubborn bolts. Finally, after a few minutes of effort, the flat tire was removed and the spare put in its place. Raphael tightened the bolts firmly, making sure the wheel was secure. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and his hands were greasy. He looked at his watch again. 9:45. His interview had started at that very moment. "Done," he exclaimed, wiping his hands on his pants. "You can go now." Isabella's smile was radiant. "I don't know how to thank you," she said sincerely. "You saved me. I was completely lost." She opened her purse and took out her wallet. "Please, let me give you something for your time." Raphael waved his hand, refusing the offer. "No need. I'm happy to help." "But you're late because of me," she insisted. "Where were you going?" The truth escaped Raphael's lips before he could even think of disguising it. I had an interview at Montero and Associates. It was very important to me." Isabella's smile faltered for a moment, replaced by an expression of surprise and something Raphael couldn't decipher. "At Montero and Associates," she repeated, as if the pieces were falling into place at that moment. "Yes," Raphael confirmed, feeling the weight of his loss fall upon him. The opportunity he had fought so hard for had slipped through his fingers, exchanged for an act of kindness to a complete stranger. Isabella looked at him for a few seconds, an intense and inquisitive gaze. Then, an enigmatic smile curved her lips. "Well, Raphael, perhaps this meeting wasn't so coincidental after all." Isabella's sentence hung in the humid morning air, suspended between the distant noise of traffic and the buzzing of a curious insect. "Well, Raphael, perhaps this meeting wasn't so coincidental after all." The words, spoken with that enigmatic smile that seemed to know more than it revealed, didn't immediately make sense to Raphael's mind. His brain, still processing the bitter reality of the missed interview, struggled to connect the dots. The dirty shirt, hands smelling of rubber and grease, the clock mocking him with the time starkly showing 9:50. Casual? The only thing he felt was the crushing weight of a monumental opportunity, turned to dust by a poorly timed act of chivalry. He blinked, trying to clear the confusion. "I'm sorry, I didn't understand." Isabela Montero stepped forward. The aura of a damsel in distress had completely dissipated, replaced by a calm and penetrating air of authority. Her blue eyes, previously distressed, now assessed him with an intensity that made him feel transparent, as if she could see through his disappointment and read the ambitions he kept under lock and key. "My name is Isabela Montero," she repeated, this time with a different emphasis, as if the surname itself were an explanation. "I am the CEO of Montero and Associates." The air seemed to thicken. The sound of traffic on the avenue became a distant white noise. Raphael felt a wave of heat rise up his neck. The CEO, not a distant relative, not a department manager, the woman at the top of the pyramid, the person whose name was engraved in gold letters in the lobby of the building where he should be at that very moment, trying to impress a mid-level recruiter. He hadn't just helped a stranger, he had changed the tire for the queen of the castle he dreamed of conquering. The irony was so absurd, so overwhelming, that he almost laughed, a nervous laugh bordering on despair. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. What could he say? "Nice to meet you. Sorry for my amateur mechanic look?" Or maybe, "What a great first impression, huh?" Noticing his shock, Isabella softened her expression. "You missed your interview because of me, Raphael. I can't ignore that." She opened her elegant handbag again, but this time it wasn't her wallet she took. It was a dark leather card holder. With a precise gesture, she removed a thick, subtly embossed white card and extended it to him. "I have an unavoidable meeting now, but I don't want our conversation to end here. Please come to the company tomorrow. Ask for me at reception. Let's say 10 o'clock. Raphael looked at the card in her hand and then at his own hands, filthy with grease. He frantically wiped them on his pants, an instinctive and useless gesture, feeling his face burn with shame. With still trembling fingers, he took the card. It was heavy, more than just a piece of paper. The perfectly aligned black letters read, Isabella Montero, Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Montero and Associates below, the address of the imposing skyscraper, and a direct phone number. It was a passport, but where to? For a formal humiliation? A perfunctory apology? Or, and his heart gave a treacherous leap at the thought, for something more. I don't know what to say, Mrs. Montero, he stammered, finally finding his voice. Say you'll be there, she replied, with a smile that for the first time seemed genuine and unenigmatic. And please, call me Isabella. With a final nod, she turned, got into the black sedan, and drove off, leaving Raphael alone on the shoulder of the road. He stood there still, the card in his hand, the smell of burnt rubber in the air, and the morning sun beating on his face. The world seemed to have turned upside down in the last 30 minutes. He looked at his old goal, then at the luxurious business card, and the distance between the two universes seemed infinite. The drive back to his small apartment in the Velha neighborhood was a blur. Raphael drove on autopilot, his mind a chaotic whirlwind of what-ifs. He held Isabella's card in his right hand, resting on the passenger seat, as if it were a fragile artifact that could disintegrate. Each red light was an opportunity to look at it again, to trace the embossed Montero and Associates logo with his finger, to reread the title Executive Director, until the words lost their meaning and then regained it with full force. Was it a joke? A cosmic prank? He replayed the scene in his mind in an endless loop. The frustration on her face, the relief when he offered help, the gratitude in her voice. It didn't seem fake. But the proposal, to show up at the company the next day, for what? To receive a formal thank you and a pat on the back. The idea filled him with a mixture of hope and dread. The hope that his act hadn't been in vain. The dread of being seen only as the dirty kid who changed a tire. A funny anecdote to be told in the boardroom. Pulling up in front of his building, a simple 3-story structure, he looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His hair, once carefully combed, was disheveled. There was a grease stain on his cheek. The white shirt, a symbol of his professional aspirations, was irreparably ruined, with a dark stain stubbornly spreading across the fabric. He looked like an imposter. How could he walk into that temple of glass and steel the next day and ask to see the CEO? The receptionist would probably call security. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step weighing like lead. He opened the door to his apartment and was greeted by the familiar silence. The place was modest but tidy. Books on finance and economics were piled on his desk next to his laptop. On the wall, a whiteboard with notes on derivatives and market analysis. This was his sanctuary, the command center from where he planned his conquest of the corporate world. Today the place seemed small and his plans naive. He tossed his keys onto the coffee table and threw himself onto the couch, exhausted. It wasn't physical fatigue, but mental. The adrenaline of the morning had dissipated, leaving behind a residue of confusion and anxiety. He placed Isabella's card on the wooden table, next to a copy of The Intelligent Investor. The two objects, side by side, represented the duality of his situation, the knowledge he had fought so hard to acquire, and the luck, or misfortune, that had crossed his path so unexpectedly. He needed answers. Driven by an impulse, he grabbed his laptop, sat down at his desk, and with his hands still slightly dirty, typed Isabella Montero, CEO Montero and Associates into the search engine. The results flooded the screen, and Raphael's jaw dropped. The woman he had helped on the roadside wasn't just an executive, she was a legend in the financial market. The Iron Lady of Blumenau, read the headline of a business magazine. How Isabella Montero tripled the value of her family consulting firm in 5 years, announced another. There were photos of her at economic forums, alongside ministers and renowned businessmen. There were interviews in which she spoke with sharp eloquence and intelligence about emerging markets, risk management and business ethics. In one interview, a phrase of hers caught his attention. In the financial market, numbers are important, but character is fundamental. I can teach someone to analyze a balance sheet, but I can't teach integrity. And at the end of the day, it's in integrity that I invest my greatest capital of trust. Raphael read the sentence 2-3 times. Character is fundamental. I can't teach integrity. Could it be? Was his test not in the interview room answering questions about the capital market, but there on the hot asphalt, with his hands greasy, in front of a flat tire? The idea was so audacious, so unconventional, that it seemed like something out of a movie. Night fell and Raphael couldn't eat. Hunger had been replaced by a knot in his stomach. He paced back and forth in the small apartment, alternating between euphoria and panic. Hope was a fragile ember, which he tried to protect from the icy wind of doubt. What if she was just being polite? What if, upon arriving, he was greeted by an assistant with an envelope containing some money as a thank you, an elegant way of dismissing him? The humiliation would be unbearable. He stopped in front of the bathroom mirror. The reflection staring back at him was that of an exhausted young man, with dark circles beginning to form. But behind the fatigue there was a different gleam in his eyes. It was no longer just the stubborn determination of a student who wanted to succeed. There was something more. There was the vertigo of being in the face of the unknown, of having glimpsed a path he didn't even know existed. The interview he missed no longer seemed so important. That selection process, with its predictable steps and rehearsed questions, now seemed small, bureaucratic. What Isabella Montero had offered him, without explicitly stating it, was a different kind of evaluation. A real test, where life was the exam. He took a long shower, feeling the hot water wash away not only the day's dirt, but also some of his anxiety. Upon exiting, he grabbed his best suit, a dark charcoal grey he'd bought with his first internship paycheck, and hung it outside the closet. He chose his best shirt, a light blue, and a silk tie to match. He polished his shoes until he could see his own reflection in them. He didn't know what awaited him the next day. It could be the biggest opportunity of his life or his biggest disappointment. But as he set his alarm for 6 in the morning, a certainty solidified in his chest. He would be there, not as the boy who changed a tire, but as Raphael, the young man who, faced with an unexpected choice, chose to help, and who was now ready to face the consequences, whatever they may be. He picked up the business card from the table, felt its weight once more, and carefully placed it in his inside jacket pocket. It was more than an invitation. It was a gamble, and Raphael, for the first time that long, surreal day, felt he had the cards to play. The sharp ring of the 6 a.m. alarm was merely an echo of reality, as Raphael had already been awake for at least an hour, staring at the shadows dancing on his bedroom ceiling. Sleep had been an intermittent luxury, a series of short, anxious vignettes where he saw himself either being applauded in a boardroom or being thrown out of the building by security guards. The entire night had been a long and exhausting negotiation between hope and skepticism. As he sat up in bed, the morning silence seemed heavy with expectation. Today was the day. The ritual of getting ready had the solemnity of a soldier donning his armor for battle. The shower was methodical, the shave performed with a surgical precision he didn't normally employ. As he put on the charcoal suit, he felt the cool wool against his skin and a subtle shift in his posture. The suit, once a symbol of his aspirations, now felt like a costume, a disguise for the boy whose car smelled of tire rubber and whose hands still held the memory of grease under his fingernails, no matter how much he'd scrubbed. He looked in the mirror. On the outside, a promising young professional. On the inside, a churning sea of anxiety. He skipped breakfast. His stomach was closed, a tight knot of nerves. The only thing he managed to swallow was a glass of water, while his eyes scanned the notes on the whiteboard. Swap analysis, yield curve, implied volatility. All the technical knowledge he had accumulated seemed strangely irrelevant to the challenge he would face. Yesterday's test wasn't in the books, and today's, he suspected, wouldn't be either. Stepping out into the street, Blumenau's hot, humid air enveloped him, a sensory contrast to the sterile, air-conditioned environment he was about to enter. The drive to the financial center was a torturous repeat of the previous day, but with a completely different soundtrack. Instead of his motivational playlist, the only sound was his own breathing and his racing heartbeat. Every corner, every traffic light was a reminder of his fateful detour from 24 hours earlier. Passing the exact spot where he'd encountered Isabella, he couldn't help but look. There was only the indifferent asphalt, no evidence of the drama that had unfolded there, an empty stage whose play had changed his life forever. And then he saw it, the Montero and Associates headquarters. If yesterday the building had seemed a monument to success, today it stood as an impenetrable fortress, a palace of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. The dozens of floors reflected the morning sun in 1,000 directions, blinding anyone who dared to look directly at it. Raphael parked his Gold 2 blocks away, feeling his modest car an offense to the landscape of luxury sedans and imported SUVs that occupied the private parking lot. Walking those 2 blocks was like traversing a minefield of self-doubt. Each step toward the building's monumental entrance was a step away from his comfort zone. Impeccably dressed professionals entered and exited the revolving doors with a familiarity he envied. They carried leather briefcases and spoke on their cell phones with a confidence that seemed a prerequisite for breathing that air. Raphael tightened the strap of his own simple briefcase, feeling like an intruder, a boy who had accidentally won a golden ticket. Taking a deep breath, he entered. The temperature shock was immediate, the frigid air conditioning a relief to his sweat-dampened skin. The lobby was even more impressive inside. The soaring ceiling created a silent echo, a hum of efficiency and power. The white marble floor shone so brightly that it reflected the recessed ceiling lights like distant stars. In the center, an abstract sculpture of twisted metal stood like a totem of modernity. On an entire wall, a digital panel displayed stock market quotes in a constant stream of green and red numbers. The scent in the air was a mixture of gourmet coffee, expensive cleaning products, and something more intangible, the smell of money. His destination was the reception desk, a long, imposing slab of polished black granite, behind which 2 women worked with serene concentration. He chose the one on the right and approached, feeling his shoes make a sharp, inappropriate sound on the marble. The receptionist, a stern-looking blonde with a discreet headset, looked up. Her smile was professional, but impersonal. "Good morning. How may I help you?" Raphael's heart hammered against his ribs. It was the moment of truth. Either his story continued, or it ended right there, at that polished counter. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Good morning. My name is Rafael Costa. I have an appointment with Ms. Isabella Montero at 10 o'clock. He watched her reaction closely, braced for the confused look. Sorry, there's nothing under Raphael," the polite dismissal. The receptionist furrowed her brow slightly, not with disdain but with concentration, and turned to her computer screen. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. The ensuing silence lasted only 5 seconds, but to Raphael, it felt like an eternity. He could feel a bead of sweat trickling down his back. Then the woman's eyebrows arched in an expression of genuine surprise. Her gaze returned to Raphael, but this time the impersonality had vanished. There was a new respect, an evident curiosity. The professional smile was replaced by a warmer one. "Ah yes, Mr. Rafael Costa. Ms. Montero is expecting you. Please, one moment." She picked up the phone and spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper. "Lucia, Mr. Costa has arrived." A pause. "Yes. Understood, thank you." She hung up and turned to him, indicating the access gates. "You can go up, it's the top floor, the penthouse. Her assistant, Lucia, will receive you when you exit the elevator." The validation was like a wave of relief that left him momentarily dizzy. He was on the list. It wasn't a dream. He thanked her, his voice slightly trembling, and passed through the gate, which opened for him with a soft beep. The elevator was so silent and fast that the only indication of the ascent was the pressure in his ears and the rapidly changing digital numbers above the door. He was alone. The mirrored metal box reflected his image from every angle. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, smoothed his jacket. The city of Blumenau unfurled beneath him through a small window, the buildings shrinking, the cars becoming tiny, colored dots. The ascent was both literal and metaphorical, and he felt himself growing further and further away from the world he knew. The elevator doors opened not to a corridor, but directly into a spacious and serene environment. The contrast with the lobby was striking. Here the floor was covered in such thick, dark grey carpeting that it muffled any sound. The walls were adorned with large pieces of contemporary art. There were few doors, all of dark, solid wood. The silence here was different. It was an expensive silence. A middle-aged woman with greying hair pulled back in an elegant bun and thin-rimmed glasses rose from a sumptuous desk. Her posture was impeccable, her smile discreet. She was the personification of competence and discretion. "Mr. Costa, I'm Lucy, Ms. Montero's assistant." Her voice was calm and velvety. "She had an unexpected call. It will only be a few minutes. Would you like coffee or water?" "Water, please." "Thank you," Raphael managed to reply. Lucy led him to a small waiting area, consisting of 2 sumptuous leather armchairs and a glass coffee table, on which rested a single white orchid in a crystal vase. One entire wall was glass, floor to ceiling, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the entire city and the green hills surrounding it. A view from the top of the world. He sat on the edge of the armchair, feeling the soft leather beneath his fingers. Lucy returned with a glass of iced water on a silver tray. The level of formality and luxury was overwhelming. He felt like a pawn that, by a twist of fate, had ended up in the middle of a master chess game. Time dragged on. Each minute of waiting was another minute for his imagination to run wild. He rehearsed what he would say. Would he begin by thanking her for the opportunity, mention the tire, or act as if it were a normal business meeting? The last option seemed ridiculous. He looked at the closed, dark wood door, the CEO's office door, wondering what was happening inside, imagining the woman who, one day, had presented herself to him in a state of vulnerability, and the next, controlled this empire from the top of her tower. 10:10 in the morning. The silence was broken only by the almost inaudible hum of the ventilation system and his own heart. He looked out at the view, at the city where he grew up, which now seemed like a map, a scale model. He felt the vertigo of the height, the vertigo of the situation. Everything he had worked for, all his dreams and ambitions, seemed to have condensed into that single moment, in that silent waiting room on the top floor of the glass palace. Then, the soft sound of a door opening broke the spell. Lucy appeared in the doorway of the office. She looked at Raphael, and with the same discreet smile, announced the words he both feared and hoped for. "Mr. Raphael, Ms. Montero can see you now." The air Raphael breathed as he crossed the threshold of Isabella Montero's office seemed different, charged with a silent electricity. The space wasn't an office, it was a statement, spacious and minimalist, dominated by shades of grey, white and dark wood. The environment exuded a serene control. One wall was entirely glass, the same panoramic view he had glimpsed in the anteroom, now seeming even vaster, as if the city of Blumenau were a carpet spread at its owner's feet. There were no piles of paper, no clutter. The immense oak desk in the center was almost empty, holding only a thin laptop, a leather notepad, and a single telephone. Isabella wasn't behind her desk like a monarch on her throne. She stood by the window, a silhouette against the morning light. At the sound of the door closing, she turned. She was dressed with simple elegance, black tailored pants and an ivory silk blouse. Without the stress of the previous day, her presence was even more magnetic and imposing. "Raphael, please come in," she said, her calm voice filling the space. She gestured not to the chairs opposite her desk, but to a more informal area, with 2 comfortable armchairs and a low sofa around a marble coffee table. The choice of location was deliberate, Raphael realized. She was breaking the script of a standard interview, dismantling the traditional power dynamic. He sat in one of the armchairs, feeling his body sink into the soft leather, while she sat in the other, maintaining a relaxed but attentive posture. Her blue eyes fixed on him, and he felt again that sensation of being read, analyzed on a much deeper level than his words. "I imagine you're curious to know why I called you here," she began, without preamble. "Curious and a little intimidated, Mrs. Montero," Raphael admitted, opting for honesty. A slight smile touched her lips. "Isabella, please, and there's no reason for intimidation. I owe you an apology. Your shirt, I hope it wasn't your favorite." Raphael felt his face flush. "Don't worry about it. The important thing is that your problem was solved." "My problem was indeed solved," she agreed, leaning forward slightly. "But that left me with a question about you, Raphael. I reviewed your resume this morning. Impeccable grades, excellent references, the best capstone project of your year. In theory, you're the perfect candidate for the analyst position. But what the resume doesn't tell me, and what no recruiter could extract in a 1-hour interview, is what happened yesterday. So I'm going to ask you directly, why did you stop?" The question, direct and without artifice, was exactly what he most feared, and at the same time, what he most needed to answer. He took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. Lying or embellishing the truth was out of the question. He was facing a woman who, according to her own philosophy, valued character above all else. "To be honest, I hesitated," he confessed. "My first instinct was to move on. I looked at the clock, thought about the interview, about everything that was at stake. The chance to work here, it's been my dream since I started college." He paused, looking at his own hands. "But then I looked again, and I saw a person who needed help, and there was no one else around. My parents, they always taught me that you can't build your success by stepping over others or ignoring those who need a hand." It sounded like their voices in my head. I knew I was going to be late. I knew I'd probably miss the interview. But the idea of just leaving you there felt wrong, worse than missing the opportunity. So I stopped. He finished speaking, and the silence that followed was heavy, thick with meaning. Isabella watched him, her face an impenetrable mask. Raphael felt he had just bet all his chips. Finally, Isabella leaned back in her armchair, a long sigh escaping her. "Thank you for your honesty, Raphael. Many people in your place would have invented a heroic story about how they didn't think twice. The hesitation makes your act even more significant, because it shows it was a conscious choice. You weighed the pros and cons and chose to do the right thing, even at a very high personal cost." She stood up and walked slowly to the desk, picking up a single sheet of paper. It was his resume. "I have a company with almost 500 employees," she continued, turning to him, the paper in her hand. "Many of them are brilliant. Financial geniuses, spreadsheet masters able to predict market trends with frightening accuracy. I can hire a dozen of them tomorrow. What I can't easily hire, what you can't learn in any university or MBA course, is what you demonstrated yesterday on the roadside. Integrity, empathy, the ability to put a stranger's well-being above your own immediate interest." She approached again and stopped in front of him. "You missed the interview for the financial analyst position, Raphael. That selection process ended yesterday, and the position has already been filled." Raphael's heart sank. That was it then. A nice speech, a thank you and a dismissal. The hope he had nurtured dissipated like smoke. He braced himself for the final blow, for the "I wish you luck in your career." "However," Isabella continued, and her tone changed, acquiring a new intensity. "While you were busy changing my tire, you were unknowingly participating in another selection process. Mine. And in this interview, Raphael, you didn't just pass. You aced it." Raphael raised his head, astonished, not understanding where she was going. "The analyst position you applied for no longer exists for you," she said with a glint in her eyes. "I have something else in mind. A special projects analyst position, working directly under Ricardo Vargas, my director of strategy. It's a role that requires not only technical skill, but an extreme level of trust and discretion. You won't report to a department manager. You'll report to him and indirectly to me. The salary is 30% higher than the original position. The responsibilities double." The air left Raphael's lungs. The sound in his ears turned into a high-pitched hum. He tried to process the words, but they seemed to belong to an alternate reality. Director of strategy, special projects, higher salary, directly from her. It was surreal. He began, but his voice failed him. Isabella placed his resume on the coffee table. "I'm not offering you a job out of charity, Raphael. I'm making an investment. I believe that people with your character are the pillars upon which strong companies are built. The technical skills you'll learn. Richard is the best to teach you, but your essence, what made you stop that car yesterday? That's priceless. It's the most valuable asset you could bring to Montero and Associates." She extended her hand to him. "The job is yours if you want it. No more interviews, no tests. The decision is yours." Raphael looked at Isabella's outstretched hand, then at her face, and finally at the city view through the window. The entire city seemed to be holding its breath with him. This wasn't the end of a dream. It was the beginning of one he didn't even know he had permission to dream. Raphael's hand met Isabella's. The grip was firm, sealing not only a work contract, but a pact of trust born under the most improbable circumstances. For a moment, Raphael's brain refused to formulate a coherent response. He just shook her hand and nodded, a silent gesture that carried the weight of 1,000 words. I accept. Of course, I accept," he finally managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Miss Isabella, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she said, releasing his hand with a satisfied smile. "Thank me in a year, when the projects you help to run bear fruit. The work will be demanding. Richard isn't an easy boss, he's brilliant, but he expects nothing less than perfection. You'll have to learn fast and prove your worth every day, especially having walked in through the front door." The implication was clear. His unusual hiring would be noticed, and he would be under a microscope. He was no longer an anonymous candidate. He was the CEO's protégé, a title that was both a privilege and a burden. "I'm ready for the challenge," Raphael affirmed, and for the first time that day he felt a wave of pure and unwavering confidence replace the anxiety. "I know you are," said Isabella. "Now go home, rest, celebrate. Lucy will contact you later today to schedule your visit to HR tomorrow to take care of the paperwork. Your official first day will be next Monday. Until then, this building is off limits." The last sentence was said with a playful tone, which made Raphael smile. Leaving the office was the exact opposite of entering it. Lucy accompanied him to the elevator with a genuine smile, calling him Mr. Costa, with a respect that now seemed real. The silent elevator descent wasn't a fall, but a float. He felt light, as if gravity had lessened its hold on him. Stepping out into the dazzling sunlight outside the building, the world seemed sharper, the colors more vibrant. The glass palace, which had intimidated him before, now seemed welcoming. It was his place. He walked the 2 blocks to his car in a blissful trance. The old goal never seemed so inadequate, but he got in with renewed affection. It was in that simple car that his destiny had changed course. As soon as he turned the ignition, before even shifting into first gear, he grabbed his phone. There was only one number he could call at that moment. He dialed his parents' landline. His mother answered on the second ring. "Mom," he said, his voice choked. "Raphael, my son. So, how did the interview go? We're all rooting for you." Raphael laughed, a laugh that turned into a small sob. "Mom, Dad, I got the job." On the other end of the line, he heard his mother's cry of joy and his father's deep voice asking, "Really, son?" He told the whole story. The flat tire, the missed interview, the woman who was the CEO, the unbelievable offer. His parents listened in silence, and when he finished, there was a pause. "That wasn't luck, my son," his father said, his voice thick with pride. "That was your character. We always knew, always." That conversation, the emotion in his parents' voices, made it all real. The joy he felt wasn't just for himself, but for them, for being able to somehow repay the sacrifices they made for his education. The following days passed in a surreal blur. The visit to the Human Resources Department was a contrasting experience. Amidst forms, medical exams, and standard procedures, he felt the weight of bureaucracy. The HR manager, an efficient but visibly curious woman, couldn't hide her perplexity at the direct hiring by the president. He was briefly introduced to Ricardo Vargas, his future boss. Ricardo was a man in his 50s, with graying hair and a gaze so sharp it seemed capable of dissecting a soul. He greeted him with a firm handshake and few words. "Welcome. Be here at 8 o'clock on Monday. We'll have a lot of work." There was no warmth, only the expectation of results. Raphael understood that Ricardo's trust, unlike Isabella's, he would have to earn from scratch. Finally, Monday morning arrived. Raphael prepared with the same care as the day of his interview, but anxiety had been replaced by focused determination. As he stopped in front of the Montero and Associates building, he felt a shiver. This time he didn't stop at the reception. With the temporary badge he had received from HR, he approached the turnstile. The confirmation beep sounded, and the glass barrier opened. That simple electronic sound was, to Raphael, the sweetest of melodies. It was the sound of a door opening, not just to a building, but to his future. As he walked through the imposing lobby, no longer a stranger, but a part of that universe, he knew the journey would be arduous. He would have to prove to everyone, and especially to himself, that he was more than just the lucky guy who changed a tire. The interview was over. The real test was just beginning. Raphael's first day at Montero and Associates was the beginning of a long and frigid professional winter. News of his hiring, shrouded in mystery and sponsored by the CEO herself, spread through the company corridors like a silent virus. He wasn't seen as a colleague, but as a curiosity, an anomaly. The looks he received in his first few days were a mixture of perplexity and disdain. Smiles were forced, lunch invitations non-existent. He was the guy who changed a tire, a living anecdote that for many tarnished the meritocracy the company so prized. If the hallway was cold, Ricardo Vargas's office was the Arctic. His new boss was a man forged by the implacable logic of numbers. To him, Raphael's story was noise, a sentimental variable in an equation that should be purely mathematical. Ricardo didn't harass him. He tested him with methodical cruelty. He gave Raphael the most arid tasks, the most complex reports, the raw data of projects no one else wanted, and offered very little guidance. It was a clear survival test, sink or swim. The first few weeks were brutal. Raphael found himself drowning in an ocean of corporate jargon and financial analyses that went far beyond his theoretical training. The ghost of imposter syndrome was his constant companion. He arrived at the office before sunrise and left long after the city lights came on, the view from his office becoming a constellation of luminous points. His nights were populated by spreadsheets and presentations, a Herculean effort to fill the gap he felt existing between him and his colleagues, many of whom boasted MBAs from world-renowned universities. Loneliness was his greatest enemy. In the cafeteria, conversations would stop when he approached. In team meetings, his opinions were met with polite but indifferent silence. He felt he needed to do more than just a good job. He needed a miracle. The opportunity, as before, came unexpectedly. Ricardo assigned him to evaluate a small technology company from Blumenau, Innovatech, which was on the verge of bankruptcy and seeking a buyer. On paper, it was a lost cause. Debts were high, cash flow negative, and 2 senior analysts had already recommended the summary dismissal of the investment. For Ricardo, it was just another thankless task to test Raphael's resilience. Raphael delved into the numbers and saw what everyone else saw, a financial disaster. But something bothered him. Amidst the pessimistic projections, there were patents for innovative software and an extremely high customer satisfaction rate among its few clients. He remembered Isabella's phrase, "Character is fundamental." What if a company also had character? Disobeying the unspoken protocol of analyzing everything from his desk, Raphael did something no one else had done. He went there. The Innovatech headquarters wasn't a building downtown, but a renovated warehouse in an industrial district. Upon entering, he didn't find the discouragement he expected, but a hive of feverish activity. He saw a team of passionate young engineers, led by a founder who, even in the face of imminent ruin, spoke about her products with a sparkle in her eyes. He saw the dedication, the sacrifice, the intangible asset that no spreadsheet could ever quantify. He saw the heart of the company. He spent 2 days at Innovatech, talking, listening, understanding. He returned to Montero and Associates with a fervent conviction. His report was an affront to all conventions. Yes, he presented the gloomy numbers, but he dedicated most of his analysis to human capital, the culture of innovation, and the loyalty of the team. He argued that Montero and Associates wouldn't be buying a failing company, but rescuing a core of genius that, with financial support and proper management, could become one of the consultancy's most valuable assets. In the meeting room, before Ricardo and 2 other directors, the reception was glacial. "Raphael, is this a financial report or a poem?" one of the directors sneered. But Ricardo, for the first time, didn't dismiss him. He challenged him, attacked every point of his argument, but there was a new curiosity in his gaze. Raphael, now defending something he truly believed in, didn't waver. He rebutted each point with the passion he had seen in the eyes of the Innovatech founder, supported by qualitative data he had collected himself. In the end, Ricardo only said, "We'll see." But the next day, Raphael learned that Ricardo had taken the report directly to Isabella. A week later, Montero and Associates announced the acquisition of Innovatech. It was a game-changer. In the months that followed, with Montero's management and investment, Innovatech flourished, and its innovations began to generate surprising profits. Raphael's poem transformed into a prophecy. The whispers in the hallway died down. The disdainful looks were replaced with respect. Ricardo started giving him more important projects, asking for his opinion in meetings and, on rare occasions, sketching something that looked like a nod of approval. Raphael was no longer the lucky guy. He was the analyst who saw what no one else saw. He had survived his trial by fire. 2 years had passed, 2 years of hard work, of victories won, and of a growth that Raphael had never imagined possible. He was no longer the scared newbie, but one of the most respected names on the strategy team. Montero and Associates had become his home, and Ricardo Vargas, from implacable taskmaster, had transformed into his most valuable mentor. One day, Ricardo called him to his office. The atmosphere, once frigid, was now familiar. "Have a seat, Raphael," he said, with genuine cordiality. The board approved the creation of a new position, manager of new business and strategic acquisitions. The role involves leading the team that seeks out companies like Innovatech. It's yours if you want it. Raphael was speechless. It was more than a promotion. It was the recognition of his unique vision. "Ricardo, thank you. You deserved it," said Ricardo. "I admit at first I doubted you. I thought Isabella had made a sentimental mistake. But you proved to me that a balance sheet can tell you the health of a company, but only character can show you its soul. And you, Raphael, have a talent for seeing souls." With the new position came a new responsibility. Raphael now participated in the final committee for hiring new talent. The irony did not escape him. He, the man who had been hired without a formal interview, now decided the future of others. And so on a rainy July afternoon, he found himself in the same meeting room where he had once defended his report on Innovatech. Before him sat a candidate who was his perfect opposite. Young, graduated with honors from a European university, with a resume that shone with internships at global investment banks. He was articulate, confident, and answered all the technical questions with impeccable precision. He was, on paper, the perfect hire. As the interview was about to end, Rafael's phone rang. It was Lucia. "Rafael, a message from Isabella. She's stuck in a traffic jam on Aldo Pinho Bridge. A truck broke down and blocked everything. She'll be at least an hour late for the board meeting." "Understood, Lucia. Thanks for letting me know." Rafael hung up, and an idea, a spark of memory and purpose, ignited in his mind. He looked at the impeccable candidate before him. "I have one last question for you," said Rafael, leaning forward. "It's a hypothetical scenario. Imagine you're coming to this interview, the opportunity of your career. On the way, on Aldo Pinho Bridge, you see that a truck has broken down. The driver, an elderly gentleman, is alone, clearly distressed, trying to signal to cars. Stopping to help would certainly mean missing this interview and this opportunity. No one would blame you for moving on. What would you do?" The candidate smiled, a polished smile of someone accustomed to solving case studies. "Well, as a manager, the risk-reward analysis is clear. My absolute priority would be to be here. The opportunity at Montero and Associados is unique. I would use my cell phone to contact the appropriate authorities, ensuring that professional help was on its way. But jeopardizing my professional future for a situation I'm not trained to handle would be a logistically and strategically flawed decision." He responded with the cold, perfect logic that Ricardo Vargas would have applauded years ago. Rafael nodded slowly, a serene smile on his face. It wasn't a judgmental smile, but one of clarity. He stood up and extended his hand. "Thank you for your time. We will be in touch." After the candidate left, Rafael walked to the enormous window in his office. He was no longer a manager, an analyst, or a former intern. He was a guardian of the culture, the essence, the soul of the company that gave him a chance based not on what was on his resume, but on what was in his heart. He looked out at the city below, at the bridges connecting worlds, at the thousands of cars and people, each with their own story, their own unexpected detours. He finally understood his true role. It wasn't just about finding the next Innovatech, it was about finding the next Rafael. It was ensuring that while Montero and Associados sought the brightest minds, it never ceased to look, above all, for the noblest hearts. The interview was over. His work, the real work of his life, was just beginning. The circle was complete.